Hello and welcome to another instalment in the new Wolves Fancast series, Stories from the Pack. Each week we get a fellow fan on to talk really about their experiences, their first memories of supporting the club and what the club means to them. I'm delighted for this episode to be joined by Jason Guy. Jason, you'll be aware of from the Wolf Whistle podcast. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you very much. And how are you?
Yeah, really good, really good. So just before we started recording, we're having a very brief chat and talking of the Wolf Whistle, you've got a few good names coming up, haven't you?
Yes, this week I'm interviewing Carl Henry, who's going to give us his best 11. I'm also interviewing Graham Turner, obviously manager. I mean, he was the manager when I first really started supporting the club, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm interviewing Kenny Hibbett on Wednesday, and actually Guy Whittingham as well. Guy Whittingham got back in touch recently, Super Guy the Soldier. So, we're going to get Guy on the podcast as well. So we've got lots of different players and managers from all different areas to suit everybody, really.
Brilliant. And I think from my point of view, just as a listener, really, what I like about the Wolf Whistle is, how can I put this? There's players on that pod who perhaps haven't had as distinguished a career as your Bullies of this world and so forth, and they're not going to sell out tonight at the Cleveland. However, what they do have is a great story behind them. And I was chatting the other day about the podcast, and we were talking about the Wolf Whistle, and I said, you've got to listen to the Nigel Quasi one, and it's like, what? He was only here for a cup of coffee, but the story behind it, and I won't spoil it too much, but it talks about his background and getting into the game and his upbringing. So was that something you were conscious of in terms of giving those people who perhaps don't have that, platform to really talk about their stories as well? And
100%. I mean, the funny thing is with it, I find that the more recognised, the bigger name the player, the more games they played for Wolves. They normally have less downloads than the ones who've only played a handful of games. And I think that's because obviously people are inquisitive and they want to hear the story. And, like I said, Nigel Quasi only played 3 games on loan, but the backstory is he was brought up on a very tough council estate in London. When he used to get up in the morning to go to school, his mum didn't even know whether he'd come back, because his friends were getting stabbed, and so it was quite a poignant story. And like I said, I find that the lesser remembered players are the ones that get the most downloads.
Fantastic. So the back catalogue is there. Obviously, follow Wolf Whistle on Twitter when we put this out. I mean, you'll be aware if you're listening, I would have thought, but if you're not, we'll obviously tag the podcast in. So feel free to pick your favourites, but either by players that you've seen, or perhaps give someone else a try, and you might be surprised at the story that they have. So going on to the series in hand here, the stories from the pack. Talk us through, really, Jason, your sort of first... I always say Wolves game / memory because I don't specifically remember my first game. So what's your sort of first memory of going to the game, or, the day itself, and as a Wolves fan?
I came from a single parent family, and to be honest, none of my family supported Wolves really, apart from my sisters were older than me, so my sister's husband, he was a big Wolves fan, and he used to tell me stories, and if we played football, he'd recount the memories. But my first game was in 1989, January the 24th. We played Bristol City at Molineux. Steve Bull scored a hat-trick, Sherpa Van Trophy. So it's almost ingrained into me. But like I said, I was from a single parent family, and so we couldn't really afford to go to any games, and there was no one really to take me. And I remember my mum told me the day before, I think it was, that we got tickets in the South Bank. So I just remember we lived in Wensfield at the time, and I just remember getting on the 559 bus, or it might have been the 59 then, into town, and there was just swarms of people, and I'd never seen so many people. And then we went into the South Bank, and as we're walking down into the South Bank, I remember, smelling the pies and the hot dogs, and getting a real flavour for the whole day, really. And then obviously I just remember the 2 stands being open, 2 stands being closed, and the lights were hitting the grass, and it was just, I was mesmerised by it. And then I think we got in probably about an hour and a bit before kick off, and then I remember it just getting the South Bank getting fuller and fuller and fuller to the point where I couldn't even see. So I remember being up against the barrier, and then I was trying to sort of wedge my way up just so I could see the pitch, and in the end I couldn't. Like I said, Steve Bull scored a hat trick. I was hooked from then on, but like I said, we couldn't afford to go to the matches, so it was a year after that I went to my next one against Lincoln City in the League Cup. And then my mum had been speaking to a neighbour who lived by us, and she'd surprised me by saving up money for a season ticket for me, and the neighbour used to take me to the match.
That's fantastic. And it kind of resonates sort of the story there, because similar sort of time scale to myself. And also I remember the South Bank, but also remember my dad taking me to Roker Park on the terraces. And I probably didn't see any of the game, literally, because you've got these big burly guys, and some are courteous, some aren't. You don't really see it, but what you do is you feel it, don't you? I know that sounds a bit cliche and a bit twee, but we're singing from the same hymn sheet, and people resonate with that as well. It's so much is about the feel, isn't it? And that sort of first environment of like, wow, shit, this is something else, and I want a bit more of that, really. So kind of you was more of a regular sort of the next year then, do you recall too much of that sort of first season as it was, or?
Yes, so like I said, I went to that game, and then I went to Lincoln City the following year. Then the following year I got my first season ticket, which would have been 1990-91. And like I said, I was in the family enclosure, which was then in the lower Steve Bull, which was then the John Island. And like I said, I was just absolutely hooked. And, you know, I can remember all the scores from then. I can remember that. Like now, if you ask me what the score was, Arsenal away last season, I'm not going to lie, I couldn't tell you. But if you ask me what the score was against Blackburn at home that season, and who scored, and etc., and probably the attendance, I could tell you. So it was really weird, and those things sort of stuck with me. But the more recent, the less I can remember. But I just remember going up there, and once again, my neighbour would go up on the bus, and it was just the whole day. You know, it was just, like I said, I was hooked from then on. I think now I've had a season ticket every year since then, which is probably the best part of 30 years on.
It's mad, isn't it? Really, it's a weird thing with memory. I don't know if I'm similar, really. That someone will ask me certain games, and then they'll put you on the spot when you do the podcast, and you think, oh God, yeah, I was actually at the game, but I don't remember. But I think maybe when you first go, you soak so much up, don't you? I guess really, and it's kind of that. And I think people will remember sort of the John Island as it was, and they used to have like games before the match, didn't they? Because it was such a distance between the stand and stuff.
Well, I was just going to say that was it, because where the John Island stand was, I think it was something like 40, 50 yards in between the stand and the pitch. And the reason for that was obviously in the decline in the 80s, when they'd first built the stand, that the plan was to build the whole ground, move it that way. And obviously they built the John Island, and then obviously it sent the club, you know, they had financial problems, so obviously they couldn't finish the development, so the pitch stayed where it was. But I remember the matches they used to have in between there, and I remember once it was quite upsetting, really, because I could never get into the school football team, and all my schoolmates were actually playing there, and I was like, I was just gutted, because, you know, it was great going to the match, but then I wanted to be playing, so yeah.
And I think, you know, I know you're fortunate enough with, you know, meeting a lot of the former players, and that must be crazy for you. So when you look back at that time, who sort of stood out for you as sort of, who was your first sort of hero? I might know the answer to this one, but go for it.
I mean, look, growing up, on my wall, there's just pictures of Steve Bull everywhere. It's really weird because I think he'd opened up a sports shop in Beatties, and I went to meet him, and couldn't believe it. And then he opened up a supermarket, I remember, in Essington. I went to see, and I couldn't believe it. And then obviously on my debut, on my debut. I'm calling it like it's my debut. It's not my debut. On my first game, it's right.
Yeah.
So interviewing the former players, when you talk first game, you call obviously debut.
Yeah.
On my first game, Steve Bull, obviously my hero, scored a hat trick, but it was weird, really, because it was almost like it was expected because he was scoring that many goals. For Bully to score a hat trick and do the aeroplane, it was almost like that was going to sort of happen anyway. And obviously, as you say, you fast forward the years, and I'm very fortunate that Bully's come to my wedding. I've been on holiday with him. He's a mate of mine now. So it's almost turned full circle, and it's quite weird, but you still have to pinch yourselves when you're talking to Bully and Andy Much and Robbie Dennison and players from that era who I remember. And I know I'm lucky to be able to do that, and I'm very lucky to call them my friends.
It's brilliant, but I think that sort of era, like you say, sort of 1990 as well, similar to myself, sort of going to the games. Bully was everything. It was that team. He was that identity, and it was just it was a cultural thing in Wolverhampton. It was he was just so synonymous with everything, really, and the resurgence. So it does get talked about a lot, but kind of rightly so, because for that era it symbolised so much, and you always felt as if you had a chance, when he was in that side. So fantastic. I mean, in terms of Bully, any other players that sort of stood out in that era that you look for, or sort of more of a cult hero around that time?
I just remember, obviously, I used to love Paul Cook. I mean, he was an unbelievable left foot, as you can probably remember. So yeah, Cookie, he was one, and fast forward in a few years, then obviously the money started coming. Obviously, Sir Jack was investing in the club, and then we got players such as Jeff Thomas, Kevin Keane, David Kelly, and it was quite weird because in 1989, yes, there was a resurgence, but it was almost like we still wasn't really spending money, and we still couldn't attract certain players, and the players we were getting, we weren't paying much for, but they were all great players, and every transfer that Graham Turner and every player he signed used to seem to come off. But then we started signing, like I said, Jeff Thomas, David Kelly, Kevin Keane, Don Goodman, John DeWolf, and these were players that I never thought that the club I supported would ever be able to attract, and they did. So that was just amazing.
And I think that's the thing, really. It was a time where you saw the sort of stadium taking shape, and as you say, there was a resurgence sort of on the field, but it was off the field at that era, really, where things started to develop, and you thought, oh, just look around us now, things are going to take shape. And I don't know if it was at that time or a later period. That was your sort of first home experience with the money. Do you remember your first away game, Tor James?
I certainly do. My first away game was the 29th of December, and that would have been 29th of December 1989. Wolves played West Bromwich Albion, 1-1. My first away game away at West Brom. My brother-in-law took me, and we went in the Smethwick end. I remember we went on a coach, and you could have made an omelette with what they chucked at it. There was eggs, tomatoes, blocks of chicken, everything was just being chucked at the side. So I was quite scared because I was only a young lad.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't really want to. Anyway, got into the Smethwick end, and I think that match, I could not see anything. I couldn't. And West Brom scored first, 1-0. Gary Bannister, 27 minutes. And then I think it was the 94th minute. Rob March popped up with the equaliser. My good friend Colin Taylor also played in that game. And, what an experience. First away game at West Brom. We get a point in literally the dying seconds. What was yours, Hoops? What was your...
Mine? That's a good question. I've got a feeling there's a couple of memories that I have. I remember Roker Park vividly, and I think Goodman was playing for Sunderland at the time. Yeah. And I think that they beat us. But then there's little different things I remember. You mentioned, well, I don't know if it was on recording, but if it wasn't, we were talking about Guy Whittingham earlier. Is a name that, and I remember. I think it was Notts County away. But there's just for me, it's weird because I can't think of a date. Like your recollection is brilliant. I just remember little things. I remember, for example, going to Tranmere, and we went to Tranmere, and I remember ever so well because I was obviously quite young at the time, and my dad says, "Oh, how much for him?" And he went, "Oh, just carry on," sort of thing, and let us in for free. And that was kind of what I remember, really.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the county ground, and we got lost, and we were like 1-0 down. So I'd have to look back. Probably my first away game, if it counts, if it's non-Wolves, was probably, and it's a famous one, when my dad took me to Wembley to watch Bully against Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
So that was
the best one.
Yeah, so that was, I remember that. I mean, there was a coach put on, so that was probably my first game away from Molineux. And then I think my dad kind of just took me to games where he thought, yeah, he can probably get away with taking me to that one. And, you know, but I remember, you know, grounds like Notts County and Roker Park and the atmosphere. And I remember the terraces at Roker Park, which probably would have been my first domestic one. And as you say, similar experience in terms of just, it wasn't a derby, but just an atmosphere. And it was like, oh, you know, it was... I don't know. It's great. It's just great thinking back to those times. Oh. You can get nostalgic, and we saw some crap as well in terms of on the pitch. But it was just kind of the feeling that this is a different world. Which, you know, I suppose we didn't watch a lot of TV on at the time. Really, football, not like you do now. But it was so it was such a fantastic experience. Really.
I think as well, Hoops, we obviously, you know, it's what we're doing now. We didn't have the distraction of social media then. So to get your football fix, you did have to go to matches. Like you said, there wasn't that much on the TV. You know, the next best thing really was magazines. So, you know, to really get the experience, you know, you did have to go to the match. And I think it's funny you should say that about the Tranmere and Sunderland games, because I think I went to those as well. And then I had a bit of a break, and then the next away was, I don't know if you remember, we played Watford in the FA Cup and we won 4-1, which once again was a fantastic day. So I was quite lucky, really, in the earlier ways that we used to win a lot. But I wasn't as lucky as you to get to go to the Czechoslovakia game, because that would have been amazing.
It was a strange one, really. I think it's one of those, to be honest, mate, where the enormity of it probably is more sort of prevalent with me now. It kind of feels, we're talking to you now, I'm like, yeah, actually that was a big deal. And when I listen back to some of the stories from Bully and the connection between that and the World Cup, but at the time, so I was, how old was I? So I was about 7, 8. So at the time, it was kind of like, I remember getting the scarf. I remember the old Wembley and the Twin Towers. But yeah, that was a fantastic experience. What's been your best away game in terms of, you know, I know that you can probably answer that in a couple of ways in terms of for enjoyment and result, but
actually the best away game, and like I said, I've been to a lot. I've been supporting them for 30 odd years, and to be honest, because I didn't go to too many away matches in the early days, you know, yes, the West Brom one sticks out, but look, the best away game ever for me wasn't that far back. It was obviously Cardiff. I mean, that was just unbelievable, and the reason being is obviously Neves had scored that absolutely fantastic goal, the free kick, and then obviously towards the end they got the 2 penalties. And the first penalty, I just remember looking at the lad next to me, and I shook my head, and I still felt a little bit confident though. And, you know, I remember the lad looking at me and he was distraught that Cardiff got the penalty. So I looked at him, I said, look, mate, they've got to score it yet. And that's me. I've, you know, been to games for, you know, like I said, 30 odd years, and anything can happen. And I said, look, you know, they've got to score it yet. And they didn't. And then seconds later, they got a penalty. And I was distraught then, because I thought, oh my God, that's it now. We've blown it. They're going to score. And I looked at the lad and he turned around and went, they've got to score it yet, mate. And obviously they didn't. So I just couldn't believe that. And so that one sticks out. And obviously it was a recent one. I remember the score as well. So can't be bad.
Brilliant. And we always kind of, on this, we look at sort of the highs and the lows. So I guess really, if we start with the lowest you felt as a football fan. So you were going into towards 89, 90. As you say, we signed a number of players and there was some promotion heartache there. What in that early era did you kind of think, God, why am I putting myself through this? Did you have that sort of moment?
Well, I think obviously when we first got promoted, Graham Turlock, we had two successive promotions in 87, 88 and 88, 89. And then obviously we was languishing in what's now the championship for several years. And then obviously Sir Jack Hayward started spending money, but the expectancy levels have grown just as they have now. And I just, obviously the game for me was obviously Bolton away in the playoffs, where we'd done obviously so much in the home leg. And to go to Bolton and we I think we almost knew that it was going to be one of Bully's last chances to help get us up. And that was just, you know, I just remember, I didn't cry at that match, but I just remember being absolutely just devastated and distraught at the fact that that we'd probably lost our chance. And then I just knew that we wasn't going to come back bouncing next season, and you know, we didn't. So that was probably the game for me. That was ultimately the lowest. That, and the only other two games I have actually cried at are the playoff final, because obviously we'd waited for so long to get there, and then we did it. And the other one was Brighton away, when, you know, Mr. O'Hara, you know, decided to be paying more attention to what was going on in the crowd than what was going on the pitch, which ultimately cost us our championship status.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think, you know, yeah, the Bolton one for me was just. I remember I spoke on the last pod about this one. It came up. I think I watched it on the video wall when they did the beam back, and they you know, the images that we see now, and we won't dwell on it because let's keep it positive. But at that time, I think what you mentioned there is probably right. It felt like an all or nothing game, didn't it? Really, it kind of felt as if the money's been invested and it's now or never. But on a positive note, then, would you say that the Cardiff final is probably your moment where you thought, God, it's not going to get any better than that at that time, or?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you followed Wolves for as long as we have, nothing is unexpected in the end, and anything can happen. And the thing was, for me, yes, we're 3-0 up at half time, but I still wasn't enjoying the game. Even in the second half, I thought, right, you know, Sheffield United are going to pull one back, then two, then three, then four, then, you know, I could see it coming. And then they got the penalty. Matt Murray saved it. And even then, I still didn't think that we was home and dry. And it wasn't until Sir Jack put the thumbs up. And then, I think he almost said to us, looks all right now, we're up. And then that's when I started crying, and everyone else. And you're looking at ground men, you know, who were, obviously I was in early 20s, and then there's guys in their 30s and 40s and 50s crying their eyes out. And you're like, wow. Just that day was just unbelievable.
Brilliant. And really what I ask everyone, really, because I think, you know, how I see the football club, and I'm sure many share the same sentiment, is the football club sort of forms part of the city, and it's the heartbeat of the city. So how, obviously, I know you know how you feel strongly about the club, but how do you feel that links in with the city, and how the city and the football club are important to be, you know, intertwined? And the success of it, you know, has a net, you know, feel around the city.
But it does. I mean, you know, it's a fact that financially that the city does better when the club's doing better, and you know that's completely evident. And I think where Wolves are lucky in a couple of ways is we are a one club city, so we do get, you know, we're not like Birmingham where there's two clubs you can support. There is only Wolves. And the fact that the club, like you said, the heartbeat of the city, it's so close to the city centre, and I think it's one of the few remaining clubs which is still in the city centre. And you know, I've got fors and against if they want to move, and you know, I understand why and if, but I think it has been, like you said, the heartbeat of the city. That, you know, from having a few pints before the match to walking under the subway and to seeing the statues, it is just a huge part of the day. And I think sometimes when these clubs are moved onto industrial estates and to brownfield sites, that can be lost. But I think we're looking at Wolves and we've still got that.
I think that's the thing, really. I saw on Twitter today someone posted a photo of Main Road, and that sort of stuck out to me. You probably saw it as well with the alleyways and so forth. And I went to Main Road, and that's a pure example. I mean, the Etihad, you've probably been. It is beautiful. It's absolutely stunning, and that team is incredibly successful. And I can be a little bit nostalgic, and some people might go, actually, you've got to move on. And I get all that, and I get that, and you've got to go with the times. And to be successful, you have to change. But I think I don't want to lose that essence of that community in terms of that ground is there and the alleyways and so forth around it are kind of part of it. So, but you know, it may be a nice problem for us to have. I mean, it's strange times at the moment because I'm being nostalgic because we haven't got any football at the moment anyway. But it's crazy to look back, but. In talking of the present team, I mean, you know, you talk about when, you know, similar trajectory really to myself. This is the best we've ever had it, haven't we, really, as we're talking now?
Look, for being a Wolves fan, this is the best I've ever seen. And, you know, I don't remember the 70s, and we had a really good team in the 70s, by the way. But you speak to the fans from the 70s and they say, this is the best team they've ever seen. And I think then really you've got to go back as far as the late 50s when we were the 50s where we were winning everything. So, yes, this is the best team we've seen. But with this grandeur and this football we're playing and all this success and the money comes a high expectancy level. So when we was going to the matches in the late 80s, we remember how bad it was. And the 90s when, you know, we was the needy men and not quite good enough and spending loads of money on journeymen that, you know, I don't think the heart was really there. And, you know, we obviously, we didn't go up and we was languishing. But the expectancy levels now, you've got people who don't clearly remember that and know that, young people. And so all they know is success. All they know is Fosun. All they know is the Chinese ownership. All they know is money. All they know is Europe. And you know what? So, you know, I'll get a bee in my bonnet with them sometimes on Twitter, but the reality is it's all they know.
Yeah, and this is it. And I think I've got to caveat that with when I say it's the best we've experienced, I say it the we as a generational thing, completely, you know, respect the fact that, you know, Wolves were 1 point, you know, proclaimed champions of the world, effectively champions of Europe and so forth. So we know that and we haven't reached that. But I think there is that pinch in me moments when there's this generation and a couple prior to it where you have to embrace it and go, this is really good. So we're all hoping as we reminisce that, you know, when it's safe and all clear to do so, that we'll get the football back up and running. Have you got any thoughts on that? I'm not putting you on the spot here, hopefully, but in terms of, are you of the opinion, let's write this one off, or your opinion, let's see it out as and when we can, or?
It's a really difficult one, Hoops, because obviously if you look at social media, from all the, you know, from all the Sky Sports football and all these blue tick accounts, there's so many different options and stories and theories coming up of when it's going to be done. I think ultimately the season has got to be finished somehow. How, I don't know. But you know, the flip side of it is there's people losing their lives, there's people fighting for their lives, there's people in hospital, there's people losing loved ones, and what that really does is put football into perspective. But you know, life must go on. But I don't know how they're going to finish the season. They do need to do it, but I've just got no idea how.
And I think on that, Jace, it just made me think, actually, just finally, talking there in terms of the personal touch. I know you've been involved on social media about the NHS Trust and the former Wolves players as well. So I don't know if you want to take that up, but just or add on to sort of my 2 cents on that. We'll put the details up there. There's, I think, lots of memorabilia going up there at the moment for people to bid. So obviously this is a time of recording, but I think this will be a continuous effort. So obviously we know it's a difficult period, but we'll put the information out there as well. So, but I think that's gone really well so far as well. With again, I think that's the community and the football club working as one as well.
Oh, 100%. And you know, look, I help the former players and I help run the Wolves All-Stars. And the problem has been over the years, there hasn't been a great link between the club and the former players. And that's a fact. However, you know, they have got the Wolves FPA set up now who are doing fantastic work. It's set up within the club. Richard Green and Paul Berry are a big part of that. And there's former players, John Richards, Steve Daly, Matt Murray, etc. on the committee. And they're doing a fantastic job. So now the link between the club and the former players is better than it ever was, which is fantastic. And testament to that is the fact that Carl Henry has rallied a load of former players up to raise nearly £50,000 for the NHS, which is fantastic. That's on top of the money that the current players have already give. So, you know, initiatives like that are obviously much needed. And, you know, it just proves, like you said, the link between the club and the former players.
Fantastic. And I think with that, you know, we know football's on pause and we know the reasons why, but it's still fun to reminisce and talk about, you know, memory lane. This is what we're doing on the Fancast and this is what you're doing on the Wolf Whistle as well. So all I would say really to people listening, if you want to share your stories as well, get in touch with us on the Fancast. We've just recently launched an alternative Hall of Fame. Listen back to those episodes. Which Jason is, you know.
I was just going to say, which is very, very good. I've listened to, obviously, the George Elokobi one, the John DeWolf one. Look, they're fantastic. So you guys are going to keep up the good work as well, because that's, you know, a really good idea. And you have got to reinvent yourself almost. But I don't know if you found it. I think the podcasts are a great way of getting information over. And now more and more people are listening to them because there is no football.
Yeah, no, it's a busy time. We've got a lot of these lined up. You mentioned Paul Berry. We're going to be joined by Paul Berry he's going to do his stories as well. We've got a lot of people lined up. So between us all, we'll put the and we'll keep things going. So I think from both of us, thanks for listening and stay safe and stay well.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers.